What's going on, people? I wanted to clarify some confusion that I created by accident, and I had a few people recently point this out to me. Let me start off by saying that Christianity is a white slave religion. Now, I've said that many times in the past, and I'm sure I'll say it many times again in the future. But I've had when you tell that to a black Christian, obviously they don't want that to be true because they're black, but they're Christian, so they have to try to find some way to reconcile being or descending from slaves and still carrying their slave master's religion that it was given to them. So they'll kind of respond to me and they said, "Well, how can Christianity be a white slave religion and you believe that Jesus was black?" And that kind of surprised me. I was like, "Well, why do you think that I think that Jesus is black?" And they pointed out that I had used images of a black Jesus in one of my videos, the Messiah remix. Well, that's true. I did use black images, and I didn't put the context of why I did that. So let me go ahead and explain why I did that now. I used images of a black Jesus in that video because at that time when I first came to YouTube, that's like my first YouTube video. I was dealing with black Christians, like these Christians with this fake black pride, Hebrew Israelites and other Christians, little strange sects of Christianity, and they had like this little half-assed black pride. So they insist that Jesus is black. So personally, I don't really care what color Jesus is because he's imaginary. He does not exist. But just to help them accept what I was saying to them, I used images of a black Jesus so they wouldn't get hung up on the argument. And that is the only reason I use images of a black Jesus. There is no way to really tell what color Jesus was. A, because he didn't exist. And B, because there's no real description of him. You can only go by like the pictures and whatnot. You can't say that because he's a Jew you can help determine his color, because Jew is not a racial classification. Jew is a religious classification. There are people in the Bible who become Jews. You do not. It's a religion. Anyone that converts becomes a Jew. Anyone that follows Judaism is a Jew. They follow Yahweh. They're Jews. So it has nothing to do with color. So you can't say that. So you can't say that the Jews were this color or that. I mean, saying that Jews were black is like saying Christians are white. It doesn't work that way. So you can't really determine it by him being a Jew. And since Jesus is fictional, his family tree is also fictional too. So there are no relatives you go by to see whether, or to try to determine his racial makeup, because his relatives don't exist either. He has different family trees in different books. So you can't determine it that way either. Now the most common thing that these Christians will do, well, to try to blacken up their Bible and try to make the characters black, is they'll take like certain verses and say that this points to the description of the Jews or something like that, or of Jesus. So of course the popular one with Jesus is the verses in Revelation. Revelation 1 verses 14 and 15, and that says, his head and his hairs were white like wool, as white as snow, and his eyes were as a flame of fire, and his feet like unto fine brass, as if they burned in a furnace, and his voice as the sound of many waters. So some people will take this as a racial description, but this is not what that's talking about, and that's kind of clear from the context. He says he has woolly hair, but it doesn't say he has woolly hair. It says his hair is the color of wool, which is white. His hair is white as snow. White people have white hair too when they get old. They said his hair is white as wool, his eyes are flames like a flame of fire. It said his feet are like unto fine brass, as they burned in a furnace. And people try to say this is black. I don't really know where that comes from, because brass is not black when you burn it. And it says when it's burned in a furnace. It's like when you refine brass, you burn it. It does not turn black. Matter of fact, what you're looking at now is the color of brass as if it burned in a furnace, because this is brass burning in a furnace. They're saying that he's glowing. This is not an earthly description. This is a vision that he is having, and in this vision, he is getting this image of Jesus, which is, you can tell by the description, does not sound anything like Jesus when he was on earth. Why would he have white hair when he was only 30-something years old when he died? So this is a spiritual vision that he's having, and not an earthly description. He is glowing, and he has eyes like flames of fire. We see this kind of imagery used in the Old Testament too. Even the white like wool part, we see that as well in the Old Testament. And things like people's feet sparkling like brass. We see these descriptions before. So that's what this is not giving you. It's not describing a black man. Now, sometimes they try to make the Jews black, and they say since Jesus was a Jew, he would be black as well. And one of the main things they like to use is the curse of leprosy. When Yahweh would punish people with the curse of leprosy, which would make their skin turn snow white. And they'll say that, well, if they were white, then that would not have shown up, so they must have been dark skinned. But you don't have to be black or dark skinned, or especially black, for it to stand out, for chalk white skin to stand out. That would stand out even on regular white people. Anyone with any kind of skin tone, it would stand out if it would turn just corpse white. So that's not saying that they're black. But speaking of skin, in the book of Jeremiah, they actually talk about skin. In this speech given to the Jews about they're going to be punished for the things that they've done, because that with their actions show their nature, and you can't change your nature is basically the gist of it. And one of the parts in there, it says, "Can the Ethiopian change his skin, or the leopard his spots? Then may ye also do good that are accustomed to do evil." Now, in this verse, he's saying that he's giving as an example of not being able to change your nature. He says, "Can the Ethiopian change his skin?" Now, at this point in time, Ethiopian is not referring to someone from the country of Ethiopia as we know Ethiopia today. This is just basically saying Ethiopian back then is basically a catchphrase for all black people. So he's saying that, can the black man change his skin? Now, he would not be saying this to people who are black. By the fact that he's saying this indicates that he's talking to people who are white or light skinned. And this is not, there's other references like this in the Bible. There's the Song of Solomon, which is about it. It's like a love song between Solomon and his lover, and she says to Solomon that I am black but comely. And the key word there is but. Like, I am black but comely. And comely means beautiful. So he's saying, I am black, despite being black, I'm also beautiful. So that's giving you an idea of how they feel about black people in general. Now, that would also suggest that being black was the minority. If they didn't look on it, if they thought that black was unappealing or unattractive, then that would indicate that it's the minority. And this is shown in the Jews' other religious writings, like the Midrash. And they have explicit conversations about black Jews and like where they're coming from, where this minority Jew comes from. Now, some people will say that the only writings that are divinely inspired are the Bible, so these don't count or whatever. And it doesn't make a difference whether you believe these writings are inspired by God or not. There's still Jews who are actually eyewitnesses speaking to the fact that most Jews are not black, and they're trying to explain why these black Jews are around. So a lot of times when I'm speaking to black Christians, what they'll try to do is they'll try to appeal to history and say, well, we're dealing with ancient times, and you know that white people weren't too active in these areas at that time, like way back in the past. So they must have been either dark skinned or black. The problem with that thinking is that the Bible, yeah, historically speaking, that might be true, but the Bible is not history. The Bible is myth. It's made up. So these people can be whatever color they want them to be. In fact, like I said in one of my other videos, the first man of this generation is Noah, because the first man was Adam, but then there was a flood, so the world was repopulated by Noah and his family. Now, that makes Noah the father of modern mankind. Now, in Jewish writings and tradition, Moses is described explicitly as a white man. So if he's white, then his children are white. So according to Jewish myth, all present mankind stems from one white family, a family of white people. So Moses had 3 sons which populated the world. His 3 sons, Ham, Shem, and Japheth. So these are all white people, and black people do exist. Where do black people come from? Well, that's where things get interesting.
So black people are a cursed.
There are a couple of different versions of where black people come from, but basically, black skin is a curse. That's how Jews view black skin, as a curse. And one of the versions, to go back to the original source where we got the thing about black Jews coming from that same source, they give a version of the myth of where black people come from, period. And it says, from the Midrash, it says, but when they came out of the ark after the flood, God commanded Noah, go out of the ark, thou and thy wife, thy sons and their wives, thus putting the sexes together again. Ham among the human beings and the dog among the lower animals disregarded this injunction and did not separate from the opposite sex in the ark. The dog received a certain punishment, and Ham became a black man. So here we have God punishing Ham by turning him black for violating his commandment, or violating his instruction in the ark. Now another version involves Ham's son. Ham's son is Canaan, and that version goes that when Noah awoke and was told what Canaan did, Noah said, cursed be Canaan, and may God make his face black. And immediately the face of Canaan changed. So did the face of his father Ham, and their white faces became black and dark, and their color was changed. So here again we have the idea of black skin being a curse. Now since black skin was believed to be a curse, it is unlikely that they would, when they created the Jesus character, that they would have envisioned him as a black man. So I do not believe Jesus to be black. I believe Jesus was conceptualized by the people who invented him as being white. And that's why I believe you see him depicted as a white man all the time. Now whether or not you consider these writings inspired by God, is the Jews did consider them holy texts. And so did the early Christians. So, and just for perspective of how racist the Jews were, you have to keep in mind the time frames that you're dealing with. You don't even really see hardcore racism become big till like the Middle Ages. So this is like way before even that. Like the Greeks, when you look at the Greeks, they said that the Egyptians were black, and they spoke very highly of the Egyptians and other black people of Africa, talking about they were favored by the gods and things like that. So the Jews, they're coming out the box way ahead of everybody they're like trend setting with their racism.
I saw water. Death by water. And I saw new life. A great flood is coming. We build a vessel to survive the storm. We build an ark.
Now black Christians will try to say that the curse of Ham, or the idea that black skin is bad, is something that was created hundreds of years after the Bible was written, so therefore has nothing to do with their religion. But this isn't true. I mean, there's certain parts of it, or certain variations of the Ham myth may have been developed hundreds of years later, but the ideas were already there. The ideas had been there. I mean, the ideas in the Bible itself. Ham is the father of the African people and the black race, so he's immediately spoken of in a negative light, even as early as the Bible itself. So it wasn't something that just came out of nowhere. It wasn't something that was new. Early on, we see the influential Jewish writer Philo had openly said that black skin was bad, and he lived and died before the Gospels were ever written. So that means chronologically, Christianity formed right when this idea of black being evil was circulating. So these are the roots of your religion, and we see this from the early Christian church fathers. They will refer to the same thing, the same myth of Ham, and condemn black skin, and say that even from a Christian perspective, that since it's based on Judaism, they use that as a reference point. That is just the roots of your religion. It just is what it is. And it's not like this is some ancient thing that you can ignore. This is something that's still being taught today. This part that teaching of your religion is still there today. As early as or as recent as the presidential election a couple of years ago, they were saying that Barack Obama couldn't be elected because he was black and therefore subject to the curse of Ham. And this is not just a couple of rednecks saying this. This is people actually saying it on political websites, and people actually saying it on television. You actually have panels of people discussing the curse of Ham in Barack Obama's presidential campaign. So this is a white religion, and it is a slave-making religion. I mean, if you listen to the words of Jesus, the Bible teaches you to love your enemies. So it's like a perfect program to have you conquer and enslave. You are to love your enemies. So if you love your enemies, you're not going to show the proper amount of aggression and hostilities towards them that will allow you to defend yourself. The Bible tells you to pray for those who abuse you. Who does that? That's completely counterproductive. It tells you do not resist when attacked. It says that if someone attacks you, you turn the other cheek. Do not try to seek revenge for yourself if someone attacks you. Vengeance is the Lord's. That's what the Bible says. So if you follow these steps, you're going to lose. If someone comes to conquer you, you're going to be conquered, and you're going to be enslaved. And if you're enslaved, it gets even worse. It doesn't help you out. If you're a slave, it encourages that. It says that if you are a slave, you are to honor your slave master and obey him, as the slave master was Christ himself. You are to obey your government rulers, as though they were God. Why? Because the Bible says that every ruler is given power by God. And since God is the one that put them in their position, when you obey them, you make God happy. I mean, this is literally like a slave making manual. Like, this is like an instructions guide on how to make a slave. And this was in Christianity. That is why they used it like that. It is a European tool for conquest. They used it to conquer us. When they came to Americas, they Christianized the American Indians because it made them easier to subdue. It was a way to stop the fighting. They would call it, quote unquote, civilizing them by turning them into Christians. That way they would be more pacifistic and not resist. And you can justify anything. You can justify any measure of brutality against someone because the Christianity teaches you that God only likes one particular path, one particular spiritual path, and if you don't follow it, you burn in hell forever. So therefore, nothing that happens on earth in your earthly life, no matter how brutal your slave master is to you, no matter how vicious and savage and inhumane the European invader was, it's not going to compare to your fate if you're not Christianized. So therefore, they're actually your saviors. No matter what they do to you, no matter how evil they treat you, they're actually your saviors. So it's justifiable. That's what it teaches, and that's what it's designed to do. This is not a positive religion. This is a tool of destruction, and anyone can see that from the outside. So when the Europeans tried to conquer China, the Chinese would resist them, and they would get into wars. So what did they do? Well, they pulled out their favorite weapon. They pulled out Christianity, and they attempted to Christianize the Chinese. That way, the Chinese would become passive and docile and be easier to conquer. So they would send the Christian missionaries out. But fortunately for the Chinese, they had seen what Christianity had done to us, black people. They had seen what Christianity had done to the Native Americans, and they had that advantage of knowing what was coming. And when they saw missionaries coming, they were literally slaughtering them. Like, we are not going to become slaves to you. We will cut your fucking heads off first. I mean, it may sound brutal, but I mean, the effects of the religion are brutal. They knew what it was about, and you should have that attitude about Christianity. You should never accept that. To this day, I don't understand. As often as I've spoken to Christians, I cannot for the life of me understand why black Christians would accept this religion that was forced upon them by their slave master. Now, the slave, I can understand. The slave didn't have much choice. But we're not slaves anymore. If your slave master is your enemy, as he obviously was, why do you think that your enemy would give you this religion if this religion could help you? If they thought that this religion could actually help you, why would they give it to you? And I've seen people ask that question over and over again. I've never seen a Christian answer it. Actually, I take that back. I have heard someone answer it one time before. A black Christian told me, oh, well, the reason the slave master gave us that religion was because Christ was magically compelling them to give us the religion so that his gospel will be spread around the world. And I couldn't help but laugh because I was like, well, if Jesus was that involved and he was going to use his powers to make the slave master Christianize you, then why didn't he use that same power to get your black ass out of slavery? Oh, man. Black Christians, man, I swear to God, they want to drive you out of your damn mind.